Good afternoon. We call this June 27, 2019 meeting of the AMATS Policy Committee meeting into order. The time is 1:34. We'll do the roll call. Mr. Peterson.
Present.
Mr. Middleton is not. Mr. Schutte.
Present.
Ms. Heil.
Here.
We have quorum. Greg, will you please do the public announcement?
All AMATS meetings are open to the public. If we have a business item, we'll have a presentation by staff or a consultant. At that point, the committee will be given a chance to discuss it, and then after that, the public will be invited to comment.
Thank you. We have approval of the agenda.
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you.
You have one addition, if I could.
Yes.
We have a letter that I'll pass out in just a bit. It's an application or letter of support for the Port of Alaska. They're putting an application for a build grant related to the port for their petroleum and cement terminal. We've done this kind of letter of support in the past, so they've asked us to do this again. And so I'll just pass it out. It's just, it's not something it's not a business item, but I'll just have it out for informational purposes. So we could just add that under general information.
So I can add that at item 6D.
You could do that, or 7A,
7A
what
it
you
is.
want.
All right.
Mr. Chairman and Craig, I guess, it's an item of general information, it's not an item for us to adopt or take action on.
We're just asking for a signature from the chair representing AMATS. It's not,
You are asking us to approve it.
no, not for approval. I mean, we've always done in the past just saying, here's the letter, and just want you to be aware of it and sign it.
What power do they send them?
Okay. He didn't know he was going to do that, but there you go.
What if I don't want him
Then you guys can direct him not to do that.
to? Okay. Good to know.
Well, and I took a tour of the port here a week or so ago, and it was worse than I expected. And so anything we can do to try to move that, project along, I'm all in favor.
Cool.
Okay, do we have any change, we just had the change, are there any objections to adopting the agenda?
No.
All right, the agenda is approved. We have before us the minutes from May, is that right? Yeah, May 23rd, 2019, for approval. Do we have a motion?
Move to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Thank you. Let the record show that Mr. Wimbledon showed up at 1:37.
Throwing things.
Sorry. Any changes or discussion on the minutes? None. Any objection to approving the minutes? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Moving on, agenda 5A. Review and approve the 2040 MTP Tech Memo Number 3 for release of key information in the project list for 30-day public comment. Craig, will you be presenting?
Miss Underwood will be presenting, our senior planner, managing that project.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, I'm Vivian Underwood with AMATS. For this, you have a cover memo and tech memo number 3, which is alternative development and screening and recommendations. And you also have another more detailed list of projects that is the 11 by 17 list. We did not make copies for you. Well, also you should have Appendix A, which is part of this. But we presented that to you almost a year ago, so we didn't make copies of that, and we're beyond that now. Anyway, it's all rolled into Tech Memo A. And so I'd like to just give you a short presentation. I know we have just 10 minutes, just to catch you up on where we are. And
Do you need one to next slide?
Yes, please, next slide. So what we're asking for the committee today is to please approve for 30-day public review and comment period, the detailed list, project list, this one. It will become Appendix B of Tech Memo 3. And with information from Tech Memo 3 to the public. We're not going to give them the whole Tech Memo to review and comment on, but just a list of projects this time. And we're going to provide all of this other information for background information. So just to tell you where we've been since November of 2017, we're in the final phase now, but this phase actually took way longer than we first anticipated, but We had a great public review in November of 17, and we developed some scenarios that you all are very well aware of. We did the modeling. We changed a little bit our approach to the scenarios. We refined the list. We had to do a lot of editing to coding for the model. We did scoring. And then we've had 3 really good in-depth work sessions with the AMATS Policy Committee, the TAC, and the Citizens Advisory Committee to get to this draft that we have before you today. So we feel this is a solid draft. I have to say something about the schedule. We are behind, and there are reasons for that, but one of the main reasons was in the beginning we had to take the RFP through the municipal purchasing department. That took 8 months. It took 4 months to get the RFP squared away. So we were like a year behind already. And then we understand that so we had a change also in how we did things with the policy committee wanting to be more hands-on this time. And we welcome that. But we didn't have that built into our schedule in the beginning. So just understanding that, we are activating our right to exercise a year extension. It's a grace period that we get automatically. We don't have to ask for it. We just have to tell FHWA, which we've done. There are no ramifications to that, except that we need to stay on schedule from here on out. So our goal is to have the public review draft for the MTP out this fall, certainly by November. And then we would appreciate your help with shepherding this document through the Planning and Zoning Commission, the Assembly, so we don't miss a deadline for sure. And so in this list of projects, this gives you the numbers. There are actually more non-motorized projects that will be done with the road projects, because almost every single road project has in there too, the project would consider non-motorized improvements. So it's pretty even. Transit is, the reason why there are so few projects there is because they wanted us to not put anything else in the plan that had not been vetted first by their current transportation short-range plan. So that, because we have to take a snapshot in time and carry it forward, we'll have to talk about how that all plays out for this MTP. But those results will definitely be for the next one, the transit. So for this alternative, the final list of projects draft, it's a blend of both scenarios that we heard from the public. Some people liked the first scenario that was a little more incremental, how we've been doing things, and the second one was doing more new things. So we've had support for additional capacity on the Glen Highway, but also we're not adding additional lanes to a lot of the arterials. And Northern Lights is a good example of that. We've moved that to illustrative. And UAA Drive stays in illustrative, and the Lake Otis extension is now outside of the MTP. So we're not trying to build wider roads, wider arterials. We are strengthening the Glen Highway. We're trying to be more responsive to the public in this regard. Okay, so here's some new things that we put out for our survey number 2 that are in the plan. These may not be revolutionary to other communities, but they're new for us. So we're taking a lane away from Northern Lights to make room for non-motorized improvements from Minnesota to Seward, right? And that's pretty big. That's a new thing to do. And we're also having a PEL study for Minnesota Drive Multi-Way Boulevard. And we're still keeping the project in the MTP for intersection improvements at Minnesota and Spenard. Right, or Tudor.
It's Minnesota and Northern Lights Benson area.
Okay, excuse me. So we are moving the HOV lanes on the Glen Highway, which were very popular, out to illustrative because the DOT doesn't want to make the situation worse for the area of the Glen to Seward Highway connection. And we're doing a TDM study in the UMED area, and the UMED road extension for Bergaw is totally out of the MTP now. So we're doing the 3rd and 6th couplet with the fifth conversion to two-way, which was in the downtown comprehensive plan and that had support during survey number 2. And we are really excited about the incident response management frontage roads on the Glen Highway. That's something that's been needed for a long, long time. And kudos to DOT and PF for doing the ICM study that has that recommendations in it. And so, of course, the Minnesota Drive and 36 Aspenora Road couplet study is in there. Some of the projects to implement these are later on, but we're going to get the studies done earlier. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but these are some of the projects that were advanced from long-term or illustrative to doing earlier. And then next slide, please. And then these are some of the ones that were moved out to later time frames that we thought we could wait on. And that was with help during the work sessions with you all. So these are the results from the work sessions we had with the committees. And these were moved to non-motorized. These are the 3. Elmore Road reconstruction and Northern Lights and Raspberry Road. And then we changed the couplet project to a study, number 213. And these are just the general numbers of total revenues and costs and how they compare. So it is fiscally constrained. We are within our budget overall. And one more?
That's it.
Okay.
And it gets in.
Okay, so I'm going to turn this over to Aaron so he can regale you with the deficiencies analysis and how this list of projects addresses our needs. And then we'll have questions and go from there.
Thank you. I'm Aaron Yogenilan. I'm an AMATS planner. So I was just going to quickly do a comparison between the deficiency analysis and what was modeled for the project list that was developed as part of the work session. So basically what's in these lists here is the model results we'll be showing you next. But I want to kind of show you comparison between so you can see what happens to the system. So the first one is the deficiency analysis. I'm actually going to move over here so hopefully people can see it a little bit better. So this is the deficiency analysis. What we did is we took the projects that were going to be constructed or had funding for construction in 2018 and kind of did a cutoff and said, no, we're not going to look at anything else. And if we use the socioeconomic assumptions out to 2040, this is what the net would look like. So basically, if we didn't make any improvements beyond 2018 or so. And as you can see, there's some areas of concern. Muldoon is looking a little rough. Tudor, Spinard, Minnesota, Northern Lights Benson, UAA Drive, Northern Lights near UAA Drive, the Seward Highway, Midtown-ish area, and of course the 5th heading out of town along with the Glen Highway. I'm showing you the Anchorage Bowl first, and then we will be looking at Eagle River. So, and then there's some other ones that are down there with O'Malley and Abbott Road. So then what we did is we modeled the results out of the work sessions. As you can see, a number of things improved. Abbott O'Malley area significantly improved. The Seward Highway made some significant improvements. You also see that there are some areas that got a little worse, and that's just because there's a recognition that improvements are being made, so it's attracting more vehicles to that particular route. Spinard got better. The Spinard, Minnesota area, I know it's very hard to see, I apologize, but I didn't plan on the sun being out so strongly. This area here has made some improvements, but you see it's still a little red. That's because the project to take a lane from Spinard on either side is there. So you have a reduction in capacity, which generally relates to a reduction in LOS for that particular intersection. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing, it's just something to kind of pay attention to. You see that we have some improvements here in the Midtown area, but as you can see, there's some areas that are pretty red. A lot of that's probably intersection-related concerns in the area. We have some improvements to Northern Lights over here. Instead of LOSF, there's a little bit of reduction here, and that's just because it's recognized that more traffic, you got to recognize this is 20 plus or 20-ish years from now, so there's going to be a lot of traffic on the route or the roads. Tudor has made some improvements. The area closest to the Seward Highway has made some improvements. The area through the Lake Otis has not necessarily made some improvements. And then the areas near Elmore and MLK Drive have made some improvements, but not completely. Big reason for that is we don't really have any Tudor Road projects in the MTP to specifically address some of this congestion that you see along here. But some of the kind of other routes we've made improvements on have helped. A big one is the MLK extension over here that goes near the Muni building and the transportation yard that was there. So it's a positive. As you can see, we can have effects wherever we go. Muldoon is significantly better, and a lot of our reasoning for that is the other improvements we've made in the Midtown area have kind of helped to draw some of the traffic off of there. We've made some improvements over here at Northern Lights. It's Northern Lights and UAA area. It was recognized that the biggest problem with that is not necessarily the road itself, but the intersections. And so when we took a look at it a little more, we recognized there's going to be some more work we have to do on how we can make improvements in the area. Not necessarily right here, but kind of in this whole area right here to help with access to the UAA area, UMED area. Bragg improved a little bit. As you can see, the way out of town on 5th and the Glen Highway has not actually improved, it's gotten worse. One of the big reasons for that is there haven't been any Seward Highway projects added outside of the frontage roads. Recognize the frontage roads are for emergency services only, so they are not going to help with the congestion issues that you see on the Glen Highway. And so the HOV lanes taken out did reduce the level of service on the Glen Highway over time. Any questions on this unanchored pole? Okay, Vivian, can you advance the next one? Okay, so this is the deficiency analysis for Eagle River. As you can see, there's significant level of service red on the Glen Highway, kind of most of the way through. But that's about it. There's really not a whole lot of other issues in the area. There's a small little bit of congestion through here, but intersection related. Yes?
Hey, Aaron. So in looking at, particularly in that southwest corner on the
Here?
base property, yeah,
Over here?
this incorporates the idea of the feeder roads for the Glen, correct? For the frontage roads?
This particular one does not, no.
Okay.
The next one will, and I'll kind of show you that.
Then and maybe it's because I don't know the road system there well enough. When you look at that far southwest corner, just right below the airport that's on that map, Bryant Armchair Airport,
Over
or
here?
whatever it says. There's a segment where you have two green level of services on either side of a red level of service in the middle. I'm having a hard time understanding what that is. Are those on-ramps and off-ramps?
Oh, right here, for example?
Down further.
Or this,
Right there, yeah.
this small little one right here. It could be that this is the Arctic Valley, or what is the? Yeah, this is the Arctic
okay.
Valley one where people get off.
Okay,
so
thank you.
It does help a little, yes. It's not a perfect science. Please recognize that. But yes. Okay. Any other questions? Vivian, can you hit the next one? So this is the modeled results. As you can see, it's very hard to see, but I'll be upfront about it. The Glen Highway is not better. It may look like it, but it is not. The reason it looks as it does is because the frontage roads are kind of overlapping on the main highway itself, because what we have to do is we have to do a far out extent of the picture, so it kind of lumps things together. So please note the Glen Highway through here is still level of service F through this time period, even though we've added the frontage roads. And as I said, that's because the frontage roads are not necessarily for congestion. So you have a little bit of improvement through here, through the Artillery Highland section, adding that third lane. And as you can see, going further north, we have significant improvement all the way through. A lot of that has to do with the interchange improvements we have in here. And then just kind of small, it's mostly the interchange, honestly, because we don't have anything else being added. So the interchange we have at Highland, Artillery, we have a few improvements at this North Eagle River one. And I think that's it. We don't have any other improvements further up, but as you can see, it's a pretty long impact, positive benefits through the whole highway. So that's about it. It was just to give you a quick show and tell of the pictures. So do you guys have any questions on this particular map? Okay.
I just wanted to add one more thing. This is just the projects now. This is, construction and things we're doing. We're also going to have an implementation chapter on policies and action items. So those are other things that we can fund, like through the UPWP, things that we'll be doing. And it won't be just us. We'll be making recommendations for partnering with other agencies to do those things. And I do need to let you know one other thing. The congestion management process update in 2015 went through and recommended a lot of new performance measures. And Tech Memo 1A for the MTP actually did a yeoman's job of pulling all that together. And for every single goal and every single objective, there's either a recommended performance measure or a recommended new policy, or using a performance measure that we already have for each objective. And the point is, we wanted to be more objective-driven, performance-based. And that's what FHWA wants us to do. One thing that we have not been doing, and other communities haven't been very good at this either, is using our performance measures to identify needed solutions. Basically, what we and other MPOs do as well, we hear, is we do exactly what we've done. Is we look at the universe of projects, we go to the CIP, we have surveys, we ask people what they want, what they would like to see, and then we score them. And I think our scoring criteria really worked for us very well this time. I'm very happy with the way projects fell out. So just wanted to add that. And thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm wondering if the legislature doesn't happen to get a capital budget passed this year, is that going to delay some of these projects, because we do get quite a bit of federal funding for some of that, and we may not end up getting that federal funding if the budget passed? Any idea on that?
I can answer that. Yeah, typically not, because our capital program in the state is based on a federal fiscal year.
Oh,
And so as long as they make some progress between now and the end of August, we're really good. But if we start getting towards the end of August without a capital, then we need to start worrying.
okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah, all of our match monies for both state projects are provided for until then.
All right.
All right, any other questions or comments from the committee? Any comments from the public? Please state your name.
Cheryl Richardson. I have a question for Vivian. I just looked through Tech Memo number 3, and I'm wondering, what were the takeaways from the modeling that gave...
Cheryl, can you come closer? The microphone may not pick you up.
Sorry, I'm having a hard time speaking today. Can you please tell me the takeaways from the 5% modeling that gave 5% of the trips to alternative transportation? What were the takeaways in that process? What did you learn?
Well, that's a good question. So the modeling results are in here. Unfortunately, it didn't make that big of a difference. So if we want to make a big difference, a huge difference it wasn't just transit, by the way. It was non-single occupant trips. So that could be anything other than a person driving alone in their car. It could be carpooling, taking the bus, other things, riding the bicycle for that matter. But so we just picked 5% because in literature, oftentimes 5% is a goal where you can start to see a difference. Unfortunately, with our model results, we didn't see that big of a difference. So it was just, we did that for discussion purposes to see where we might want to go and what direction to go in. We know we definitely want to keep encouraging public transportation for sure. And to coordinate with land use on that. So it will be our policies, especially because we don't have other funding revenue sources right now for additional transit, right? Everybody knows that. and the current assembly cannot obligate future assemblies to a funding stream. They can't be sure of the next year's funding or the next assembly's funding. So I think we're going to really have to start looking at policies and parking policies, and working to make like transit-oriented development work with the development side of things too. And we got comments on that too, to look at the city centers, look at the places where the high transit ridership is and try to locate transit-oriented development in those areas. So, and making the two work together, leverage that. So, I guess we were disappointed in that, but it was illustrative for us.
Yes.
Is it reasonable, sorry, I'm going to blame it on the smoke, but I can't snot today. Is it reasonable to ask what level of non-SOV trips it would take to pull off to make a difference? If 5% wasn't a reasonable number, would it work to ask what number should we be shooting for to make a difference?
No.
The problem we run into is we don't know what policies we need to get to that percentage, and even a 5% shift is huge, is a massive amount of shift from what we have nowadays. So sitting there and saying 10, 20, 30%, yeah, we can come up with it. We can come up with any number we want. The problem is making sure that we put the policies in place that can realistically achieve that number.
However,
And we
I do-
haven't got there with this, and that wasn't something we did this time around because we were trying to test the waters to see what it was like and see how we could move forward. Go ahead.
Excuse me, Aaron's absolutely right, but so this goes back to targets and what are we aiming for? So we need more information to do that. But one thing, so for the federal performance measures, we're supposed to develop targets, and we're supporting the DOT's targets right now. But we're going to be asking you all, when we bring the performance measures to you, to decide on which ones we're going to be using for the future, because we have to cull that list down, it's too many. What are our targets for those performance measures? And that's like putting your mouth where your money is. It's being more intentional with how we're doing things. The pain of having a target is you may not reach it, you may not get there. But if you don't have a target, you won't know if you got there. You know?
So one thing we discussed as a team that I think kind of speaks to what Cheryl is talking about is the MTP can help us move forward in a direction that may be different than where we are today, more where the community wants. And one of the ways to do that is set the percentage that you want broken down between the different modes. So you can say, we want to start heading towards 80% roadway, single occupancy vehicle or whatever we want to classify it as. And then, 15% bike or 15% ped, 10% bike, however we want to break it down, something like that. That's how the MTP can help move forward. We just didn't have that available at this time, and we didn't really find out that that was our way forward until after we had kind of already gone through the modeling process and everything like that. So that would be our recommendation for future MTPs, or this one as well, but as well as future.
Mr. Wellington?
Thanks. So I can understand your constraints on the 5%, but if you look at goals, you kind of look and say, okay, we said 5%, no single occupant vehicle, or 5% fewer, and it didn't really impact congestion much. So it didn't do much, we could say. But I think when people ask for, bike lanes and pathways and more buses, they don't even think about congestion. I don't care. I just want to be able to ride my bike safely. I want to be able to walk safely, and I want to be able to take a bus to where I'm going. And that's what I want. So once people have achieved that, I can ride my bike where I want to go safely. Well, I'm done. So to measure the success of those projects based on congestion impact on the system is a disconnect, really. I mean, from your modeling here, that's not particularly relevant, but we could be totally red on your level of service stuff, but have really achieved 100% of our bike ped. People can walk safely and bike safely. They're two separate things.
Well,
You get that?
No.
Explain that sensibly.
Yeah, but I don't know that that's. Go ahead, sorry, Aaron.
It's not really true because congestion is directly related to safety. And so when you have worse congestion in an area, you tend to have worse safety in that area as well. So when we do congestion improvements or when we target, we're also looking at the safety concerns that are in that area. So that's where Vision Zero helped or other safety plans helped. So I kind of see what you mean, but congestion and safety are pretty linked together on some aspects. So you can't completely disconnect them.
I say, if I ride down C Street on my bicycle, I can boogie. If I'm on the pathway, it's super fast. If I'm riding on the road, it's fast. And if every car is sitting there for an hour to get 2 blocks, I'm good. That's a safe road to ride my bike on. So that was successful as far as the bike ped thing goes. But this model would show, but wait, the cars are congested. It was not successful.
Well, that's because the model is specific to vehicular.
Right, I understand that, but I just want to make sure that we don't say, you know, oh, this 5% decrease didn't have any impact on the system. If philosophic or potentially the 5% decrease in single occupancy vehicles was because people felt safe riding their bicycles, we had huge success, even if there was still congestion.
If I can, I agree with that, Mr. Chairman. I agree with that line of thinking. I think that's absolutely true. If I understood the question correctly, though, the question was, we ran a third model, and for that third model, we said, let's reduce 5% by 5% the SOVs and see what happens. And what I hear is that we ran a model, and 5% reduction SOVs didn't have any impact on congestion.
Right.
No discussion of safety or alternative means, just it didn't affect congestion. And then the follow-up question being, okay, if we have to tweak that 5% number to begin to see impacts on congestion, what is that number? I don't think we know. So they're kind of two different concepts. One saying, you know, how do we affect the red, yellow, greens on the map? The other being, how do we actually measure success? I don't think either one of them independently a measure. Collectively they are, and you know, you get benefits out of both. But I'm really glad you asked that question, Cheryl, because I was curious too. I know the model. It's not easy to just adjust a slider on a model and say, okay, now push it to 13% and let's see what happens. But that's a very good question because 5% is a pretty phenomenal goal. If you look at any of the trips generated on Tudor, 5th, 6th, and then try to reduce any one of those by 5%, it's pretty significant. So it's weird in a way to say that 5% didn't affect congestion. The question it raised for me is our system designed in a way that relieving some of the pressure on one valve actually benefits the system broadly? And it seems like maybe there's some choke points in the system where no matter if the 5% reduction occurs system-wide, those choke points are always going to hold us back. I don't know.
But we do show in the model that there are certain areas that we made improvements on and it kind of helped the system as a whole. One of the things to remember about that 5% model run we did is it's completely unrealistic because we didn't have policies to go along with it. So we didn't actually give the model anything else to say, okay, these are the policies that are in place that are starting to help get you to the 5%. So we don't know what it would take to get to 5% itself. So to be like, well, let's look at 10%, 20%. If we don't know what it'll take to get to 5%, we can't look beyond that because it may be unachievable with what we have currently.
Sure.
That's why part of our thing was to sit down and talk about, okay, is there a percentage we want to start heading towards? And then what policies can we put into place? And for the future model, and I know no one likes hearing next time we'll do it, but it's kind of sometimes how it happens. Next time we'll look at these policies and try and get them into our model so we can say, okay, these are the ones that benefit us the most. Parking, pricing, anything else we can think of. There's a whole list of them. We just didn't have them at the time, and even the modeler warned us about this is just a flat percentage off the top, redistributed throughout the whole system. So it's not really a realistic model run. We just wanted to see if we had every penny we could to do it 5%, would that make a difference? And then it's, okay, well, more discussion needs to happen about what we want to do now.
Cool. Yes, Cheryl.
I guess I would be reassured if I heard what steps will be taken to further the discussion, to take it to the next steps.
Well, I think through the chair, I think what Aaron just said is what needs to happen is to talk about the policies that need to get us there. What is Anchorage willing to do? Are we willing to limit parking, or charge for parking downtown? I mean, are we willing to do that? We got to think about that, The Public Transportation Department is looking at microtransit also, those kinds of services. How could they help? They could help, they could also cause a whole lot of congestion by increasing a whole lot of new trips. So I appreciate your question, and I think it's a good one. And we've never actually done this before, just doing that kind of thing. It's a new exercise for us. So if you all can give us any direction on how you would like to see it go down the road, we really appreciate it.
Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, and, you know, we were doing some long-term projections, I guess you'd call them, on the assembly here a week or so ago. And some of the things that came up were bike sharing and some of these zip cars. And that might actually reduce the number of, you know, single occupancy vehicles. And I don't know what the numbers would be, but I know it seems to be working in other metropolitan areas around the country where I've been.
Mr. Shute?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Vivian, your comment about the microtransit triggered something in me I forgot to ask earlier. So the models that you ran were based off of the current level of service for public transit as of, you know, May 1st or whatever. But tomorrow, not literally tomorrow, Monday, they start a new service, and it includes these neighborhood routes, these sort of micro-transit routes. Did you talk to them at all about that? And if you did, do you think it'll have any meaningful impact on the modeling?
We had to use what we had at the time, in a snapshot in time. So it was my understanding, but the neighborhood routes existed with previous. So it's just that they're taking it over now, right? The public transit department.
With that, and there's some route changes too that are taking place, and maybe it'll have no impact. I don't know, but
So we can't. It's too late to go back and make those changes now.
that's
We
fine.
have to use what we had at the time. But we did work very closely with them, and we also worked very closely with the planning department on the land use plan. We used it for scoring projects, and we used for their priorities for the transit supported development corridors and other corridors. And so I feel we did do that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments from the community? All right. What is the will of the committee?
Move to approve 2040 Tech Memo 3,
Is that what we do, or we're just
We're
moving to
releasing.
allow it to be released?
or releasing, sorry,
Second.
for release, approved for release.
There you go. Second.
Didn't read the rest of it.
Second, or you're seconded?
Yes.
Oh my God, but you're welcome.
Are there any objections? Hearing none, the motion is approved. Craig, are there any other action items that I know of? All right, moving on to 6A.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the schedule is the main thing for this update, and we've already talked about that. And also the fact that we need to review the performance measures with you all. That will be probably another work session. It will be long and drawn out. So we want to get your decision on what performance measures we want to see, we want to be using from here on out.
All right. Item 6B, project update for the Spadard Corridor Plan.
Hello, Joni Bone, AMATS, Transportation Planner, Project Manager for the Smart Corridor Plan, along with Dave Tobish from Long Range Planning, who's not here today. But just to give you an update, we did have an open house for the plan last night. That was held at the Church of Love in Spenard. And we had about 40 or so folks show up. A lot of those people showed up on bicycles, which was neat. or walked over, and John was there. He showed up on his motorcycle, had cake, and tried to make it festive, and it was fun. We had a good time, but overwhelmingly, we got a lot of positive feedback from the community. They're super excited about the plan. We are too, and we also got kudos from the departments that we work with to make sure that all the transportation agencies were aligned on the plan. So thank you to those here that helped us get there. We had people from DOT and traffic and all of our other agencies that helped us with a lot of comment review and making sure our plans aligned with your agency's desires and or any concerns you have with the plan. So we are excited to move it forward. The comment period is going to be open through July 19th, and then we will make a big table with all of our public comments and staff responses, and we'll be bringing it forward to the Technical Advisory Committee maybe in August if Pete and I can get all the comments compiled and everything by then. We will have this is something we're going to do now because of our recent review with FHWA for certification, and that is we are going to make an appendix for the plan that's going to be all of the public comments that we have received during this public review period. So that'll be an appendix. It'll be available so folks can see what the process was and what folks said about the plan and how we responded. So that'll be an appendix, and then we're hoping that since we took a lot of time to go through the Technical Advisory Committee and get everything okay, that we hopefully flow through the second round fairly smoothly. But we're hoping to have it to bring to you fairly soon, the next month or two. And then I believe we're also going to take it to the Assembly for adoption because it is a joint land use plan. It will be an element of the comprehensive plan and a AMATS plan. So that's all I have. Do you have any questions for me or?
Are there any questions or comments by the committee?
I forgot to get a piece of cake.
You missed out.
What kind of cake was it?
It was just a vanilla sheet cake. We did have like half of it left at the end, and a guy walked out of the woods, and so I gave it to him.
Okay, so I didn't get any either. That's where it went.
We were there.
Did you advertise you were having cake?
We didn't advertise the cake. I know. We probably
See,
would've
they
gotten
had
more
twice as
people.
many people if you'd advertised you had
No,
cake.
you're right. You're
Cake
absolutely right.
factory. I kept thinking she said there was going to be a keg there, not cake there.
Then you'd have had 100 people.
Well, I showed up. I showed up and there was a cake.
Thank you, Joanne. Any comments from the public? All right. Now I got myself in order here. That was 6B. Moving on to item 6C, FHWA certification review update. Craig, will you be presenting?
Absolutely. Every 4 years, the Federal Highways Administration and the Federal Transit Administration come up and review our planning processes and make sure we're dotting the i's and crossing the t's and all that sort of stuff. Theoretically, if we were not doing all the things that we're supposed to do, we could be decertified. I'm told that has happened once. I think it was somewhere in Georgia. But normally, you'll get some recommendations on things that you're supposed to do. If they've given you recommendations before and you did not follow through, they might have a corrective action, things of that nature, and they'll have a bunch of findings on how you're doing. So this time around, they came up last, a couple weeks ago, I guess, 3 weeks ago, and did a couple days worth of our certification review. And then they came and presented to the TAC with some preliminary results. They expect the final should show up around August, the final report, which is a lot faster than it used to be. They used to send a questionnaire out and it would end up being 90 to 100 pages of responses back and all sorts of documentation, and they realized there's a heck of a lot of pencil whipping in there if you're repeating the same thing you did 4 years ago and 4 years ago and all that sort of stuff. So it was a little more truncated and tighter version, more succinct, because you know, a lot of the stuff we're doing is the same, and it's the same as every MPO around the country, so. The, kind of the main areas I think that they focused on, and Joni just mentioned one of these, is the idea that, you know, we always have a comment response summary with all the plans that we do, capturing all the public comments. And they want to make sure that when we finalize our plans, that comment response summary should be included at the very least as an appendix. So when we finalize our non-motorized plan or MTP or our tip with our narrative, we will have the comment responses in there. They want to make sure they're captured and we don't just do it and then it's sitting there and, yeah, you could get it, but a little more challenging to track down. They want to make sure it's included as part of the final document. So we will start doing that. In the discussion about performance measures, as you know, the performance measures showed up in the FAST Act and they continue in MAP 21, and they just it's become more of a focus as opposed to, well, we think this is what is a good project and we'll do this, and then they want you to have a performance measure that says, well, we want to reduce, you know, the traffic fatalities in this area, and this project should move the needle and reduce them by X, et cetera. So they just want to make sure that we're tying in the projects that we do closer to the performance measure. So tighten that up as well. The big item was the processes and how we go do our tip and do amendments to the tip, et cetera. The last tip, the 2015 to 2018 tip, we had, as you may not remember the exact number, but we had 22 administrative modifications, which are, for lack of a better term, a minor amendment. And we didn't have any major amendments. When we do a major amendment, the process that we have laid out in the operating agreement and in our policies and procedures is we have a public review period, and then we take it to the assembly. And then once it goes to the assembly process, it comes back to the technical committee and they adjudicate the comments, and then it goes to the policy committee and they approve it. So give or take, that's about a 6-month process. We are probably the only MPO in the country that only has one local governing body. Chicago has 20 some odd towns and cities, et cetera, that they have to deal with, and so it would not make sense for them to go to every single one of those city councils in the process. So, the federal law does not require it to go to any local governing body, but that's what we have right now, and it's in our operating agreement, and that makes it take longer. Of those 22 administrative modifications that we did, when Aaron and I looked through the numbers and figured out the percentage of total project costs and all that sort of stuff, 16 of those would have been major amendments. With that time frame of how long it takes to do a major amendment, the options are limited. In other words, you probably would want to say, well, there are only 2 times a year that you can do a major amendment. And I imagine you can understand how much more challenging it might be for DOT and for the railroad and for the municipality to deliver their programs if they're told you only get 1 time a year to amend these projects. You now know you needed more right-of-way funds on that, or transit might be adding a new project and you have to wait 5 months before we hit the cycle of doing that. It'll just make it more challenging. So, but it's how we have our operating agreement. The reason this is important is because federal law requires, and this is not the way we've been doing it, but federal law requires that anytime you add a new project to the tip, no matter what source of funding it is, if it's federal funding, it is a major amendment. So if the railroad gets additional 5307 funds and it says, we're adding this project to do this with, signalizing a crossing, that's a new project, that's a major amendment, that's a 5 to 6 month process, and that's what it is. And again, we've done these as administrative modifications if they're outside of the AMATS allocation. These will now all be major amendments. So potential solutions are, again, the one time a year to do amendments, or we could make it so instead of going to the assembly for every single amendment that we do, we would go to the assembly when we do a brand new tip. And then otherwise, it would be a report similar to the towing report or any other reports that get delivered to the assembly. And if we did an amendment, we would just let the assembly know. And if they said, actually we want to take a look at that, we just have a little discussion on it, and then we could do that But otherwise, we would not take major amendments to the assembly. That would shorten the amount of time it takes to do an amendment, because you have to remember that when we amend the tip, once the tip gets amended, it then has to get incorporated into the STIP. That's another 3-month process. So if you add the 6 or so that we have with our major amendment and 3 on top of that, there's 9, 10 months. It just would make it very challenging if we were to do a lot of amendments. So that was one of the main things they talked about, is the need for every time you add any project to your tip, it is a major amendment. And again, we've been doing it this way, certainly the 16 years I've been here. And every time we do a tip amendment or an administrative modification, it goes to the state and they make sure we dot the i's and cross the t's, and then it goes down to federal highways. And the 16 years I've been here, they've said, okay, looks good. Apparently none of us knew that it is a major amendment every time you do it. So no matter when you add a new project. So it's not as if we thumbed our nose at the feds and say, yeah, we think this is an administrative modification, even though you think it's a major amendment. They have said, yeah, you're doing it the right way. So they were incorrect in their interpretation of it, and therefore we all kind of landed in the same boat together. So that's, as far as I know, those are the main points, but as far as I know, I would think that when we get that final report, it will outline that. My thinking and my hope is that they show those as recommendations and not corrective actions, because again, they've approved them all along. It's not like we were saying, well, we did it this way, we know you don't want it to be done this way, but we did it this way anyway. So, but that remains to be seen, I guess. I'm happy to attempt to answer your questions about the certification, but that's kind of the gist of it.
All right, thank you, Craig. Are there any questions from the committee? Yes, sir.
Amongst assembly members, there is a real desire, and we're working on streamlining our Tuesday meetings. So if it's something that, are these things, I forget what so they must, does that go on our consent agenda, or are those like resolutions? Certainly not for public hearing, are they?
I can answer that one.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so we're glad to hear that, John. And the short answer is yes, that they can be dealt with quickly. We're looking at a change right now that would move it closer to where Craig described in his hypothetical scenario, so that these would be consent agenda items that you get in your packet, able to review before the meeting, et cetera, and follow normal protocol for consent agenda items. Pull them if you want to talk about them, otherwise just let them go. One question I wanted to raise to this group, though, is if you wanted a chance to look at, we have a fairly fleshed out idea of how to proceed. If we finalize that and put that on the agenda for the next meeting, just for an informational item to bring back to you guys and say, we think that this is the best way to streamline this process. Would you like to do that?
Wise and more defensible doing
Okay.
that.
Yeah, and
Especially if it becomes a corrective action, you'll have to go through
We don't know yet.
and
though.
show, but if it is, you want to make sure that you follow processes if you're going to make a change.
Okay.
Yeah, and there are 2 changes that need to be made. Obviously, it's in municipal code that all tip amendments go through the assembly, so we would need to change the code, but we also need to change our AMATS operating agreement. So the operating agreement would have to be voted on by this body and put out for public review and all that sort of stuff, and then the code has to be changed by the assembly. So I've kind of fleshed out some language for both of those, so we can bring those next month. Again, the operating agreement would have to be a business item. But we don't, it's not like we're in a giant time crunch right now to get that done, so we could do the 30 days and then pass it in the August meeting, so. We can also wait until we get the final certification to make sure they point that out, but it clearly is a incorrect interpretation of how the major amendments are supposed to happen, so we might as well jump on it now.
Yeah, especially if you need an important amendment in a couple months after you're obligating or trying to get a project in at the end of the construction season, it would really kind of mess things up.
It just really would hamstring getting the program delivered for all parties involved.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Any comments from the public?
For your general information.
General information? Craig, your
All right.
addition?
So I will pass these out to the committee, and I have some extra copies here. Pass those down. So the Port of Alaska, as I mentioned, they're putting in a build grant application, and build basically was infra, and before that was Tiger, but it's a discretionary pot of funds that Federal Highways disperses, and entities around the country have applied for these, and I think Alaska won a couple of Tiger grants at some point. I don't know if they won any infra grants, and build grants kind of new. And they're putting in their application again for the petroleum and cement terminal. I think it says in there $25 million worth. Yeah, and so AMATS in the past, I think at least 2 times, has sent this letter of support for their application, and they're asking again that our chair sign this letter showing that AMATS supports their application. They just got this to me a few days ago. I think they were trying real fast to get it moving through, and so that's why kind of a short notice, but they do need it by, let me see the date that they have in here, I think it's July 3rd. The deadline is Monday, July 15th for the application. So, we've done it before, just as here's your information and sign it, so we haven't done it as a business signing before, so I think we're in the same realm that we have had it before. Unfortunately, I did not work to get to the port here until today when I realized, hey, maybe they should be here to answer questions about it. So they're both, the port director and the assistant port director, both at a meeting, unable to attend.
The only thing I would add to that is, obviously I'm sitting in for Wolfgang. He's back in the office tomorrow. I can take this and have him sign it.
Sure.
Fax it back to you.
Yeah, that's fine with me. And I mean, I can, if there are any parts of the letter you think should be changed, we can change that, and I can get you the original copy again, but.
Was there any damage done from the November earthquake? Or any new information that popped up? Because if there is, I'd mention it, because that seems to be more recent than the 64.
I think, or
I don't know if Mr. Schutte has an answer to
Yeah,
recent damage, but.
Through the chair, the current condition of every portion of that port is cumulatively impacted by the environment, earth seismic events, et cetera. The damage after November 30 was minimal, but it certainly didn't improve anything. So we've had systemic problems with the port for decades, and it's not any one thing anymore other than time and age, really.
Might add to that. I don't know if you must have seen the pictures, but there were some where the pilings, instead of just rustling through, they were like twisted, so they had spiraling cracks in them. So some number, and it was clearly tied to that.
If you can tie something to that, then I'd mention
Do you know
it.
how many?
Yeah, they've got a group that's already looked into that. And rest assured, they're chasing every dollar they can for port replacement and repair.
Well, in some of the weak areas, they're already starting to limit tonnage. And as time goes on, that will be happening in additional areas on the port. And so we're just limiting ourselves a little bit more all the time.
All right. Are you guys okay with that? Should I take
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Never hurts to ask.
Well, I don't know. I think it would be a little more powerful to say, the 7.1 earthquake on November 30th, 18, damaged
Or highlighted even more
Right.
the,
another X number of pilings, and they expected that if it had continued for another 30 seconds, it would have been significant or something. It was very short. And they watched the ground bubbling. And they said this is going to get bad, and then it stopped just in time. So,
Liquefaction was about to start.
Right.
So I'll reach out to Mr. Rebuffo and see if he can add some specifics about, if it was 28 more filings or whatever, and then get that, and then I'll get it over to you, and you just print it off and have our director sign it, our chair sign it. Might as well, it's that much more impactful.
Well, you're gonna write a letter to try to get money, man. You wanna make it his,
Sob story as much as you can. Tug the heartstrings.
They'll give you, I mean, you could really just add in 3 sentences with that, you know. I mean, they've got at the top of their, because we have reviews with them, and they just tell us off the top of their head how much of this fuel, that's X% of our fuel supply is 70% of the cargo flights out of our airport, you know. When you add 2 or 3 sentences, it's very significant. And if that were cut off from the earthquake, how do we get supplies in and out of town? They don't have fuel for the planes.
I mean, I just think that you put 1964 earthquake in there is, oh yay, but whoa, you know, we just had a big earthquake that everybody's attention came on, and Alaska did great, and DOT did great in getting the roads going, but we're trying to identify that we've got a serious issue out there. We need to address. We need their help, and I think that's much more powerful than a very long time ago earthquake.
I'll let the colonel know that we found his letter wanting.
No, I just think that this, you
No,
know,
it's a really good point, yeah. Might as well be recent, be current.
All right. Final committee comments?
But before we get that, can I just
Yes.
mention one thing, Mr. Chair? So as we're looking at the 2019 to 22 tip, as we're trying to get all the projects in 2019 obligated, one of the projects that's in there is the Midtown, the UMed PEL or TDM study that we talked about. And that's a project that it kind of sprang up later. It wasn't in the original ranked and scored projects, et cetera, et cetera. So the match for that is what we have been trying to track down, and we're at a point where we really have about 3 weeks to identify that before it may have to slip, and we're probably almost there. I have not heard specifics on someone saying, we will write you a check for this amount. We're, unless you guys have
We
magic.
will write you a check for that amount. There you go.
And we're here, that's on, okay, got that.
It's on tape. Look it up.
What we change it to, is this 750?
Yes, I think.
We're good?
Talk to me later.
That's all I needed.
All right. Moving on, any other committee comments? All right.
Oh, is that me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, so I went to Niece's wedding in Omaha a couple weeks ago, and coincidentally, they had the National Association of Regional Councils, which is a lot of, really, I think we're first MPOs all over the country. And it was, so I kind of piggybacked on a tour and met with a few of them, crashed the party basically. And it was interesting because I always think, all I know is Anchorage is very complicated, but there was one fellow who has Craig's job, he's got 3 states, 160 different government entities to deal with. And it's like, it works okay. I was like, unbelievable. But Jessica used to work in Matsu, moved to Orlando. She was there, so it was fun to connect with her. And everyone knows Craig.
Uh-oh, infamous.
Could be good or bad.
No, they spoke very highly of him.
That's for sure.
Thank you. Any public comments? All right. This meeting is adjourned.